Yesterday, we started talking about the structure of DNA. We talked about how there is the phosphate group and the sugar group together. Those things make the backbone, the outer rung of the DNA ladder. So, in this model that you made, when we're talking about the sugar and the phosphate, what we're talking about is this white portion. Yes, they're labeled with letters, but this white portion on the outside, that's where the sugar and the phosphate group and the sugar backbone, that's what this white line represents. And in these colored bands are the rungs that make up your DNA, and these are the nitrogenous bases, labeled for us neatly on the backbone. So this first pair is a CG pair. This next one isn't. Another one's a CG pair. Then we have an AT pair. We've got a CG pair. Then we've got a GC pair. Then we've got a TA pair. And you can see this one's nicely color-coded for us. I had some templates that didn't have colors, but I didn't want to take the time to have you guys color. Showing you guys which nitrogenous bases pair with which other nitrogenous base. So just to review briefly, if I had this code, ATC, GGG, TAC, without flipping back, if that's one side of the DNA, ATC, GGG, TAC, what would the other half of the code need to look like? So the nitrogenous bases always show up in the same pairing. A always goes with T. So because A is starting the top chain, T would have to start the bottom chain. Yeah, it would have to go TAG, CCC, ATG. Because these guys only pair a specific way. A pairs with T, C pairs with G, and that's it. So in the past, I've asked this question. I'm not going to make you do this question now. Everyone, I'm going to show you kind of the results of having asked this in the past, but there are also, this is one of those things, and the frustrating part for biology for me, growing up, the reason I never took any biology was because I hate just rote memorization. The idea of sitting with flashcards and just memorizing terms and dates and names and stuff, I don't love it. And so I avoided biology because that's what I reduced biology to. Like, it's all just memorization, which isn't entirely true. But when I was a high school student, that's how I reduced it. So everyone's kind of got these, for things you need to memorize, there are tips and tricks and tools to help you do that effectively. One of them is to make a mnemonic. Another one is to make an analogy that helps you keep straight different concepts. And so what this question says is, think of an analogy or a mnemonic to remember the ATGC base pairing. Share it with a classmate. I'm not going to do that for you now. Sorry, I'm not going to have you do that, but I'm going to show you some of the analogies I've had students come up with in the past. One was to combine the A and the T, because those ones always have to go together. Or what a student said in the past was, oh, okay, well, apples always go in trees, and cars always go in garages. Or gas goes in cars, sure. I mean, the analogies start to break down. What if I have a propane car? What if I have a hydrogen car? What if I have a diesel car? Now we start to get confused, right? So there's always limits to these analogies or these mnemonics. So these are analogies. An analogy is where you take the letter and connect it to an idea. A mnemonic is something like this, where you take the letter and you make it the first letter of each word in the sentence connects your concepts together. So George Clooney ate tomatoes. I don't know. That was a sentence someone decided to come up with. Or Addison Trustham, who's a student who graduated a couple years ago, so this is an older set of notes. Addison Trustham grabs cats. Apparently Addison Trustham grabbed cats. And ATGC was how he decided he was going to memorize this. However you choose to do it, you need to memorize the combinations of those nitrogenous bases. And then I'm going to make it more confusing when we start to actually use the DNA to replicate stuff. And I'm going to introduce a new nitrogenous base it's going to get messy. So at this stage, with DNA, ATGC. A with T, G with C. Flip the page. Let's talk about the function of DNA. You guys are going to be familiar with most of what we talk about today. Some of it is review of stuff you looked at in grade 9. Some of it is you're a human being. You just kind of already know this because it shows up in Bill Nye or Curious George or whatever shows you watched as a child that tried to educate you on a surface level of some of these concepts. Right now, I haven't seen any DNA episodes of Bluey, but I'm sure they might exist. So, function of DNA. DNA stores genetic information. Period. That is its role. Organisms inherit. You get an inheritance, more than just an inheritance of cash from your parents, perhaps. You inherit their DNA. Are you good? Do you need a writing utensil? No, you have a writing utensil. Cool. Organisms inherit DNA from their biological parents. This term biological is important because people forget this. And even like you guys know already, the concept of parentage is a complicated concept. For some people, the concept of parentage carries a lot of baggage. Some people might not know who their biological parents are. But the fact that the biological key here is important. You inherit your DNA from them or parent, singular, depending on the kind of organism that you are. If you are inheriting your DNA from only one parent, what kind of reproduction is that? Yes, it is asexual. So things like starfish, mushrooms, strawberries, those are all clones of their parent. Those are organisms that all reproduce in the ways that we talked about yesterday. Starfish fragment, mushrooms send out spores, strawberries send out runners. Those concepts that you learn about in grade 9. But even in the natural world, sexual reproduction is complicated too. There are species of fish, for example, that part of the maturing of the fish, like the fish is born or hatched, I guess this fish comes from an egg, and the particular species that I'm thinking of, all of them are born male. All of them. At birth, every single member of this particular fish species is male. And part of the growing up and maturing is that there is a certain point in that fish's life where it goes into a sort of form of hibernation, and it emerges from that hibernation female. It's weird. All of them start male, all of them end female. So they grow up into their womanhood. It's weird. And so it's younger male fish are fertilizing the eggs of these older female fish. And as it's part of the species' role is to transition between the genders, between the biological sexes. There are frogs where in the absence of one, certain members of that species will transition themselves. So if you have a species of frog, for example, and it happens more often in amphibians than actually it only happens in amphibians, where if the population is dominated by females, there's no males, then some of the females of the species will transition to male to help the species continue. Which is weird to think about, and it was a plot point in Jurassic Park. The fact that they used amphibian DNA and only female dinosaurs, and these dinosaurs of an only female population were still able to give birth to live young. Yes. It's a great question. I don't know the answer. I just know they do. I don't know what biological process is required for that to happen. I mean, there's other weird fish species too. The anglerfish, for example, there are males and there are females, but when a male anglerfish finds a female anglerfish that doesn't immediately kill him, because that's what female anglerfish try to do, the male attaches itself to the female. And not just, hey, we're going to hang out. He like bites onto her and stays so close to, yeah, like that, and stays so close to her that she actually grows around him and he becomes a physical part of her. She does the hunting and the eating, and he just is kind of like an appendage on the side. Their organs grow together, and then he just exists there to fertilize her eggs and provide more young. The male anglerfish is small and pathetic looking. The female is a terrifying, much larger fish. And that's how the anglerfish species does its thing. Sexual reproduction in the natural world is weird. Yet it works in a whole bunch of different ways. So the genetic information stored, and the other part of this is, where does anyone know where anglerfish live? Finding Nemo? We all seen Finding Nemo? Stop throwing things at Malik. Where do you find anglerfish?
In the ocean.
The deepest, darkest parts of the ocean. So if anglerfish are able to find each other to mate, to produce more of the species, it's important that those two that have found each other stay together in the dark, in the depths of the ocean, which is why they've adapted this particular technique of, okay, cool, I found you, I am literally never letting you leave, because now you are becoming part of my body, and I'm just going to use you to produce offspring until we both die. Sorry? What's going on? Okay, what's going on? Give Malik whatever belongs to Malik. And let us continue. Genetic information stored in DNA is found in the order, or the order of DNA we call the sequence of bases along one side of the molecule. That's all you need. You only need, because every nitrogenous base pairs with a very specific nitrogenous base, A with T, G with C. You only need to know what half the code looks like. Half the code goes ATG. You know the other half of the code has to go TAC. Or, yeah, ATG goes TAC. Has to. You only need to know half. This genetic information tells each cell what proteins to make. That's the whole point of the DNA, is to make the proteins. And proteins are something you guys are probably familiar with on a kind of a surfacey level. Proteins are biological molecules made up of chains of compounds called amino acids. There are like 23 amino acids. Some of them your body can produce from the bits and pieces of proteins you take in from other sources. But some of them your body cannot produce, and you need to find those amino acids in your diet. You need to eat things that contain those amino acids, otherwise you will never have access to them. And it doesn't matter where you get your source of protein, whether you are someone who is okay with eating meat or whether you're a vegan or a vegetarian, you have to have a source of protein in your diet. And there's ways to do that. There's very dense protein sources in the vegetable and fruit, the plant world. Beans are a good source of protein, for example. But there are also dense protein sources in the animal world that don't actually cause an animal to suffer. Eggs, for example. If you have your let's forget, for example, how chicken are raised. You have your outside free range, your chickens are living in your yard, they're eating your compost, and as long as there's not a rooster present, the eggs that the chicken will lay are never going to be fertilized. It'll never be more than the egg that it is. It cannot hatch unless a rooster is involved. Your chicken lays an egg, there's no rooster around, that egg will never be anything more than an egg. You're welcome to eat it without putting the species at risk, for example. So there's all sorts of ways to get protein that your body needs, however you choose to acquire these proteins. Yes, Malik. Yep. Insects are all insects are a phenomenal source of protein. By volume, apparently ants. Because there's so many of them and they're so small, and realistically, if we farmed ants, we would have a limitless supply of protein because they go fast. Crickets are another one that are edible. Yeah. My wife's eaten them in different places in the world. I haven't. I have never been to those parts of the world. All of my traveling has been not tropical. She's been to Thailand, Indonesia, like the Philippines, in there, and that's especially in tropical climates. It's much more common to eat the insects in those areas. So protein molecules, amino acids. Protein molecules make up much of the structure of cells in all organisms, as well as tissues in plants and animals. Now, when we talk about structural proteins, you guys have a structural protein that I can see right now on all of you. Not your skin. Your skin is not just a protein. Your hair. Your hair is just a protein. And the protein is called keratin. and what's happening is as your hair grows, the follicle is just knitting more of this protein together and adding it to the chain. It's just like another link in the chain. And as the chain grows, so your hair grows longer out of your head. It doesn't grow from the ends, it grows from the base out of your head. There's another thing on your body does the exact same thing, except it's not hair. It's sorry? No, earwax. Your nails. These guys. Just like your hair has follicles, your nail has a bed. And your nails grow out from the nail bed. It's why they don't grow from the end, they grow from the base, which is why you can clip this and it doesn't hurt. But if you get into and damage the nail down here, or if you ever find yourself in the horrifying situation of having your nails torn out by something, it's excruciatingly painful. This part hurts because it's alive, producing more of your nail. This part's dead. It's why your hair doesn't hurt while you cut it too. But if you pull it out, it's a lot less comfortable. It's alive at the base, and it's just a protein chain with no life as it is further out. Same with your nails. So hair, your nails, just protein chain. And interestingly, the proteins that make your hair, and that make your nails are the exact same protein. They're both keratin. They just show up in different ways. One as long, thin strands. The other one as these kind of big, flat plates on your fingers and toes. Sorry? Keratin. That's it. Keratin. It's a protein. That's on your nail, it's laid down as a sheet. In your hair, it's like a chain. Muscles are another one. Your muscles are straight protein. When you work out, what you're doing, gentlemen, is tearing that protein apart. You work out, you're benching, or you're running, or you're whatever it is you do to work out a particular part of your body, however you choose to exercise those. What you're doing is you're tearing those protein chains. I'm grabbing my chest because I'm imagining bench pressing, and you tear your pecs. And then what your body does is with the protein that you've consumed, maybe in your shaker bottle, you've got your protein powder, and you drink the shake. And you've done all the benching. And now what has to happen is that protein needs to go and repair those muscles. So all the tearing you've just done gets knit back together with extra protein added, and now your muscles are bigger than they were before. Yes, do what you got to do. That's how working out happens. Yes. If you don't have a source of protein, yeah. You'll either get protein. That's why your muscles can atrophy if you decide to fast, or if you're starving yourself, or if you get lost in the bush and you've got days and you're going without food. Your body will start to, because there are certain parts of your body that are more important than other parts of your body. Nobody cares about your pecs, perhaps. But your body's like, I have another muscle that absolutely needs the protein. Your pecs don't, your heart does, for example. Your heart is just a muscle, but it is vital for your survival, obviously. If your pecs don't function, you can't lift things. Your heart doesn't pump blood, you die. And so your body will start to take the protein from itself in unimportant areas to sustain the parts of your body that are important until you have no protein left, and then you're as good as dead at that point. You have to have a source of protein in your diet for your body to knit those really critical structures together. The first proteins that suffer when you starve yourself or are being starved is the least important proteins, and that's your hair and your nails. That's why if you fast for a long time, your hair starts to get brittle because those proteins aren't. Those are the ones that are sacrificed first because your least important protein is your hair. Who cares about hair? When your heart is at stake, for example. Okay? And so it needs those structures to continue to build. So in addition to the structure, various proteins control how a cell is formed and how it functions. An example of this kind of protein is the protein called hemoglobin. Hands up if you've ever heard of hemoglobin. What's it do? It's in red blood cells. Hemoglobin is a protein found in your red blood cells that allows oxygen to bind to those cells so that they can carry oxygen from your lungs to the rest of you. If for whatever reason your hemoglobin doesn't function the way it functions, you will suffocate. Because even though you're breathing the oxygen into your lungs, it's not getting transferred to your blood. And the instructions provided by the DNA are responsible for all of the protein coding you need. Malik, what are you doing? Put your leg down. The complete DNA sequence in each cell of an organism is called the organisms. Does anyone know the name? It starts with a G. No, it's the genome. It took scientists, yes. It took scientists 13 years, from 1990 to 2003. I was in grade 10 when this was announced. They mapped successfully. The project was completed. Stop it, or I will move you 5. Actually, I won't move Lexi or Kiwayne. I will move the other 3. They mapped the human genome. That was a Nobel Prize winning project. I was in grade 10 when it was announced. It was a big deal. The human genome was completed, the mapping was completed in 2003. The human genome consists of about 3 billion base pairs. To put that number 3 billion into perspective, if you counted to 3 billion, one at a time, obviously you're going to count one at a time, one number every second, it would take you 95 years to count to 3 billion. It would be I did the math. It's 95 years to count to 3 billion. I'm telling you. It's 95 years to count to 3. It's 30 years to count to a billion. 33 years. Ish. It's 95. It's 95.6. I did the math. 95, almost 96 years to count to 3 billion. And that's just how many base pairs there are. Never mind that they can be ordered in different ways. So if you start looking at all the different combinations you can have, if you ordered 4 things 3 billion different ways, someone in the other class said, well, could I have, if we're just an order of if your genetic code is just the order that those letters are in your DNA, could you have a genetically identical twin somewhere else on the planet? Theoretically, yes. But if you look at the math required for that to happen, the probability is effectively 0. Soham and Malik, stop talking. The effect is the value is effectively 0. Because there's so many of these pairs, one after the other, and there's 4 different options for each pair, for each one. These are found that your 3 billion base pairs are not one long chain. The chain gets broken up. Distributed into chromosomes. How many chromosomes does the human body have? That's not, you're close. It's 46. You have 46 chromosomes in every cell. So that chain of 3 billion or so base pairs gets broken up into 46 smaller chunks. Each one of those chunks, when it condenses down into a chromosome, and these chromosomes pair up. You have 23 pairs. And you get 23 of your chromosomes from each parent. Let's talk about chromosomes. During most of the cell cycle, DNA exists as strands. They're just kind of out there in the nucleus and getting used. They're getting copied. They're getting, well, not getting copied. They're getting transcribed into proteins, which we're going to talk about that process in a couple days. And then at the very end of interphase, the DNA gets copied. It gets copied, and then it condenses. So the strands before it gets copied are called chromatin. You would have learned this in grade 9. Perhaps you have forgotten, but that's okay. Right now, I'm just going to give you a really brief crash course on grade 9. Once the cell's nucleus and genetic material begin to divide, that process is called mitosis. The chromatin condenses into distinct chromosomes. It's copied, and then it condenses. Human body cells. Does anyone remember what those are called? It starts with an S. Your regular body cells. Those are called somatic cells, if you have forgotten that. Human body cells, somatic cells, have 46 chromosomes that are organized into 23 pairs. We said it before, we'll say it again. For each pair, one chromosome is from the mother, the biological, genetic code providing mother, and one is from the biological father. But even this starts to get complicated because there are all sorts of ways that this, now we have technology that does this in all sorts of different ways now. For example, in vitro fertilization. Does anyone know? Hands up if you've ever heard of in vitro fertilization. Only one of you. Okay, two of you, a couple of you. So what in vitro fertilization does, for some people, I think I've talked to you about them before. I mentioned I have godchildren, right? Have I told you about my godchildren? Okay, my buddy Travis and his wife Steph have children, though they are my godchildren. They were under the impression that they could not have children naturally. And they wanted kids. So they went through the whole process all the way up to in vitro fertilization. So what happens for in vitro fertilization is, because conventional conception doesn't work for some people, they went in and they actually harvested an egg. They went into her ovary and they took out some bunch of eggs. There are ways to do this. I don't know what they are. I have never had to do the research, so I just haven't done it. But they go in, they get them. Yes. You were born this way. Went and got the egg. They get sperm from the father, and they, in a petri dish, make that happen. And then they freeze most of it, and they take a couple and they implant it into the uterus of, well, at this point it could be anyone. So in a surrogate pregnancy, you might volunteer. You may be like, it's not my kid, it's egg from her, sperm from him, but for whatever reason, maybe she can't. Maybe she had to have a hysterectomy when she had uterine cancer, had a hysterectomy, so she needs someone else's uterus to hold the baby for the 9 months it takes to deliver. It gets implanted into someone. Could be it could be the donor of the egg, could be another person, and then another woman, and then that baby grows and is born, and now it has the genetic material of mother and father, and it was carried in someone, and now you have a baby. But that can happen it doesn't necessarily just have to happen that way. Yes.
Would that mean that baby has three genetics?
No, because the genes don't come from the womb is just the holder. It's sperm and egg. Even if it was carried by a third person, so a surrogate, there are women who make a living having babies for other people. It might be like someone might say for $100,000, I'll carry I'll do pregnancy for you. There are agencies that arrange this around the world. But the person who carries the baby doesn't actually contribute any genetic material. Their body is the body. They provide the nutrients, but they're not providing any of the genetic material is provided. That is done once sperm meets egg. Good question. So in vitro fertilization is a thing. Of the 46 chromosomes, the 23 pairs, one of those chromosome pairs is the sex chromosomes. Chromosomes. When you're ready, flip the page. The chromosomes, the sex chromosomes they're important enough that we have given them specific names. What are the names of these sex chromosomes? X and Y. They determine the genetic sex of an individual. If you are female, what's your code? It's not XY, it's XX. Biological females are XX. Biological males are coded XY. And remember, meiosis splits these up. So there have been times in the past, like monarchies, for example, king wants a son. Woman is not providing sons. So kills the woman, marries a new woman, provide me sons. But who, based on meiosis, who is responsible for providing sons? The guy. Because the only place the Y chromosome can show up is from the guy. So these kings that have killed their wives because she's not providing sons, whose fault was it actually? The guys, the kings. And so there's whole chunks of history that would look very different if they'd had a working understanding of genetics. But it's even more complicated than just saying XY is 50-50, because meiosis would just say we split these up, it's 50-50. Because, and again, it's weird and I don't know why this is, but if they split X and Y, then it means that about 50% of the sperm produced by a male is going to have the X chromosome, and 50% of the sperm produced by the male is going to have the Y chromosome. Those two kinds of X sperm and Y sperm are different from each other. Y sperm, male sperm, is faster for whatever reason, but it dies quicker. And X sperm are slower, but they last longer. They survive longer. And so there are ways to manipulate conception to suggest, to encourage a male to be born versus a female to be born, and which sperm survived the journey. And the reason I know this is because I have a friend. Her name's Marcy. She had a daughter, and then she had twin daughters, and she's like, I have 3 girls. I want to get pregnant one more time, and I want it to be a boy. So she's a medical professional. She's a NICU nurse, so she's well versed in baby making. Never mind that she has 3 of her own. And she's okay, cool. Here's what we're going to do. Because X sperm and Y sperm are different, we're going to time when we conceive so that the female sperm haven't had time to get there yet, and the male sperm are still alive. They've gotten there first, and they're not dead yet. And lo and behold, 9 months later, my buddy Colton was born. It's more complicated than genetics say it's 50-50, so it's 50-50. There are all sorts of environmental factors that play into this as well. So And I had this a long conversation with the other block that I wanted, because they asked particular questions. I want to bring this up here with you guys too. This unit, more than any other unit that you will be taught in any course you take in high school, needs to be taken very, very carefully. Because when we talk about genetics in school, we're going to talk about traits. We're going to talk about how those traits get passed on. And this, in high school, gets oversimplified. The danger with you guys is that you take something that's already been overly simplified and simplify it further in your brains, because that's what students do. We're going to talk about traits and how traits get passed on. We're going to talk about genetics and how genetics does its thing. And it was brought up in the other class because breeding, you can breed and select for certain traits, because we're going to talk about down here, certain traits show up in certain parts of chromosomes, and you can breed for specific traits. It's how you get these different species of dogs. And so then the question naturally comes up with, if I can breed for specific traits, if I want things to look a specific way in the animal kingdom or in the plant kingdom, why can't I just do this with people too? If there are specific traits we want in people and other traits we don't want in people, for example, Huntington's. Huntington's is a genetic disease. I'm not going to tell you a lot about it because one of you might present on it at the end of the unit. Huntington's is a genetic disease. There's a bonus code in a particular chromosome, and it is 100% fatal. If you have the Huntington's genetic mess up, you are going to die. Huntington's will kill you unless something kills you first. It is 100% fatal. It's the way it is. But if we could edit that out, wouldn't that be something we want to consider being able to do? If we could genetically test for Huntington's and then get rid of it out of the genetic code, that'd be really cool. But if you can get rid of genetic code, you could perhaps edit genetic code. And now there's a whole bunch of ethical, complicated, can we make designer babies? Theoretically, yes. And now we start to get, I want my child to have his eyes and her hair and that other person's brain. And like, we can start to design if we could figure out the genetic, we could start to do that. Or, we're going back to the breeding for specific traits. I will answer your question, Malik. You can put your hand down so you don't lose feeling in there. I will come back to you. We could breed for specific traits. For example, we'll talk about it again at the end of the chapter, but I showed the other block of this. I'm going to show it to you as well. This is what watermelon used to look like. This is what watermelon look like now. Because we have bred watermelon for a specific trait. We wanted more of the yummy flesh. We wanted less of the gross white stuff. So we bred watermelon, and over time, you get this. Here's another example. This is a banana. It's a banana. That's gross. Those seeds are massive. There's hardly any flesh. This is what you're used to bananas looking like. We have bred bananas to look this way. I want you to guess what this plant is. I will give you my entire bag of chocolate eggs if you can tell me what plant that is.
Lemon pumpkin.
Nope, 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 nope.
Tomato.
5, 4. Oh. It is eggplant. Well done. Come get your chocolate eggs. You can have this handful right here. Who was that? Memphis, was that you? Memphis, was that you? Who said it first? Imparis. Come get your pile of chocolate eggs to share with your table. Well done. How did you know that was eggplant?
I've seen that before.
You've seen the picture before?
Yeah.
What's this? Looks like roots. Don't say it because you've seen the picture.
Yeah, what's it?
What is that? This is not yummy looking. We eat this all the time. What's this?
Peas.
Someone said corn. You're right. We have bred it to look like this. And so then the question got asked in my D block class, well, if we can breed animals and plants with particular traits, can we do the same thing with people? The answer is yes. we could very easily say, oh, you have this trait, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to have kids. That's called eugenics. And eugenics was what led to the Holocaust, where you had someone who politicized certain traits, and they said the best traits are the blonde, the blue-eyed, the Aryans. They are the master race. And so no one else is allowed to breed, just the Aryans. And not only that, other races are so bad, we're going to kill them all. This is the Holocaust. So how you play with the concepts in your mind of genetics has led to wildly racist, horrific things throughout humanity. It's why slavery existed. Because people had ideas about genetic traits in particular people groups that they said those people groups are lesser than other people groups. Let's enslave them. All of that came, yes, that came from these ideas of traits and how traits get passed on. So this unit that we're going to look at right now has, in the past, been one of the most dangerous ideas and concepts that humanity has ever played with because of the sheer damage that the ideas here have brought forth. If you follow the path, you can get to very, very racist, very, very damaging, morally reprehensible, ethically awful conclusions. So I'm going to do, as we cover this content, I'm going to be real, real careful to try and help you guys navigate those waters and give you examples of where these things, these ideas have gone horribly, horribly wrong. Okay? We've got to be careful with these ideas of genetics. Malik.
So I have a question.
Yes.
My first is, can twins be born from one egg? Or just have only different eggs?
There's different kinds of twins. If you are fraternal, you have a fraternal twin. There's two different kinds of fraternal twins are the twins that you get. Like one, the classic example is one's a boy, one's a girl, and they're twins. So clearly they're not identical because you can't have identical twins with different genders. You can't have that. So there's two ways for that to happen. Either you can have one egg, and so the way fertilization happens is once egg and a singular sperm, once they meet, the egg very, very rapidly gets a protective membrane over top of it to prevent other sperm from getting in. Makes it impossible for them to get in once fertilization has happened. But you can have a scenario where two sperm show up at the exact same time. If that happens, and both sperm get in before that protective outer shell shows up, you can have the egg divide so that the egg is now divided with, and you get two separate eggs, each with one of the sperm that made it in. So that's one way to get fraternal twins. Another way is that more than one egg has made it through. So you get two eggs, and each one of those gets their own sperm. Another way to get twins. Third way to get twins is you get one egg, one sperm, and there is a problem with the cell division right at the start. It is possible for that thing to divide. One egg, one sperm divides itself into two copies where each copy has the genetic code of the one sperm and the one egg, one sperm and one egg. That's how you get identical twins. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Second question.
I saw this thing where they brought back like dire wolf.
Yes, that just recently. They're cloning dire wolf puppies from genetic material that was found frozen, yes. What's your question about that?
About that, like, could you take genetics from animals and it's like your human DNA?
No, is the short answer. Because, so, and it's why different animals, you can't breed different animals with other animals. You have to have a particular number of chromosomes. The chromosomes have to align in a particular way. That's what we're going to talk about down here. The concept of having homologous chromosomes. And different species, like I want a human being with the vision of the wolf and the wings of the eagle, and I'm going to make this freakish thing by taking genetics from all these different species and slamming them together. It doesn't work because the codes that you need to make the person part aren't compatible with the code parts, the code for the other animals. You're going to get a genetic mess that isn't going to be able to reproduce itself, like copy itself to make the organism. It's not going to work. But what they've done is they haven't cloned the dire wolf itself. They've taken pieces of the genetic code for the dire, not the whole code, bits and pieces of the code, and they've implanted bits and pieces of the code into a relative of the dire wolf. They've used the timber wolf. And so they've coded, they haven't actually made dire wolves, they've made timber wolves that look like dire wolves, which is a very important distinction. So that's what they've done. They've taken a close genetic relative and edited those things. It's why you can have horses. Another example is you can have horses breed with horses, donkeys breed with donkeys, and those donkeys can make more donkeys. The horses can make more horses. But if you take a horse and made it with a donkey, you can get an offspring. It's called a mule. But you cannot breed a mule and I don't know I can't remember what the exact numbers are. But for example, there might be 46 chromosomes in the horse, but there's only 44 chromosomes in the mule. So the egg from the horse has 23 chromosomes. The egg from the mule only has 22. So the egg from the donkey only has 22. So there's an extra chromosome provided by the horse. So now you've got an odd number of chromosomes. When you have an odd number of chromosomes, they don't pair. So that's why a mule and another mule, you can't produce more mules. You'd have to breed the horse with the donkey. You have to keep breeding horses with donkeys to make the mules, because the genetic material isn't compatible with producing more of itself. Luca. A problem with the duplication process. Somewhere along the line, it doesn't fully divide. And depending on where it doesn't divide is where the conjoining happens. Okay, yes?
If you have one more chromosome, like you die, right?
Not necessarily. It depends on what the chromosome is. So like, for example, Down's syndrome is a genetic syndrome, a genetic condition. They have an extra, I think it's the 23rd chromosome. I think it's chromosome number 23. There's an extra one. Or is it 24th? I can't remember what the number is. We'll look at it in more detail. Okay, I won't tell you which one because I don't actually know which number it is. We could Google it. But I know that in Down syndrome, there's an extra chromosome present. And the result of that is a person who can function, but they all have similar traits. There's always, physically, if you can look at someone and say, that person has Down syndrome, because the result in that chromosome is similar to everyone who has that condition. Yes? Because of which chromosome is duplicated, I do believe that they can still have kids. I don't know the answer to that question. My gut says it's not a guarantee. Yes. You'd have to be able to do like a gorilla, for example. I still don't think those are close. Hey, you did it! Well done. I'd have to look at the chromosome count. I don't know. My gut says if it was possible, it would have been done already. Okay, so let's finish this page. Keeping in mind that as we go through genetics, I want you to keep what I said in the back of your mind. Do not oversimplify these concepts, because the oversimplification of this unit has led to some of the worst things humanity has ever done. Just so we're really clear on that fact. Okay, so back to sex chromosomes. There can be problems with the sex chromosomes as well. Females are XX, males are XY. What happens if you have this? XXY or XYY. What are you genetically? And things like this happen. And things get complicated when this happens. Vikram, you had a question? Okay. Okay. Soham, you with me? Yeah. So like this is what we're talking about here. So there can be a problem with the copying in either sperm or egg that results in an offspring having two X's or two Y's. At that point, again, this is way beyond my pay grade. I'm not a geneticist. I don't know the answers perfectly, but I do know that when this happens, there are a bunch of different possible outcomes. You can have a baby born with both sets of reproductive organs. When that happens, usually what is discussed is at birth, when a doctor's like, oh man, this is a thing, at that point it's the parent's decision, because the baby you can't do this. Something has to be done at this stage so that the child's life can move forward without the physical complications of having both reproductive organs. Often what happens is a doctor has a conversation with the parents make the call. This needs to get removed, those reproductive organs stay. Can be what happens. You can also have scenarios where it looks like one set of reproductive organs, but it's not. It's actually the other set of reproductive organs. So there have been cases where on the outside, the child looks biologically female, like the appearance is female, but instead of ovaries on the inside, there are testes on the inside. And so you get representation of both. And we're not laughing about this is serious. There are certain outcomes of, so what you have then is a person who looks like a woman with all of the testosterone of a dude and none of the estrogen. And so then there's medical and real life personal implications for a person that has experienced this as well. So and this is the conversation that's happening right now down all over the world, mostly in the States, in sport. Like, yeah, like the idea of your gender being what dictates what sports you are or are not allowed to play. Now, there's a difference between the gender you identify with and you actually have a genetic condition, but both of these things are getting lumped up together into that conversation. So it's complicated. What happens when this goes wrong? Very, very complicated. We got to be very careful when we deal with that. Vikram. That's an entirely different scenario. I don't know. I got a buddy who was born with webbed feet. I don't know what happened there. Like a duck. He had webbing between his toes like a duck. I don't know what made that. You guys might know him. He was the principal at Abbey Middle for a long time. Mr. Beck. You guys have Mr. Beck? He was born with webbed toes. Yeah, fun fact, Mr. Beck. Yeah, Soham, you had a question too.
Why can't you keep both sets?
Because they have very different jobs, and they're responsible for it's called the endocrine system. It's your hormone system. If you have both sets, you're going to competing. You can't go through both sets of puberty. Both puberties have very different jobs. Male puberty and female puberty, wildly different. So you have to make sure before puberty happens, that the child is ready to go forward through only one of those processes. Can't go both. That would be bad. Stop outing who's asking. If you're going to put up your hand, ask the question. Someone's asking.
If people would be pregnant.
No. No. The plumbing doesn't work that way. Okay, so let me finish this before the bell. The sex chromosomes are always counted as a pair, even though X and Y are not similar. The Y chromosome is actually really small and pathetic. The X chromosome is quite a strong genetic material. The Y chromosome, the male chromosome, is pathetic. I don't know why, it just is. Here's a picture of it. We'll talk about this in more detail tomorrow. That's your Y chromosome, that's the X chromosome. Tiny and pathetic, big and powerful. Raw women. The remaining 22 pairs of chromosomes are called autosomes. We are going to get this done before the bell. Autosomes. If you are not a sex chromosome, you are an autosome. Chromosomes are paired based on sharing similar characteristics. Means they contain the same genes. So the chromosome with your hair genes, for example, is going to pair with the other chromosome you have that codes for the same ideas. One chromosome might say, nah, hair is going to be curly. The other chromosome say, nah, hair is going to be straight. But the hair portions are going to go together, and they're going to figure out what you're actually going to end up looking like. These are called homologous chromosomes. Homologous chromosomes. Who's got a good question? Lucas got a good question? Someone asked, if it was a good question, ask it. Someone be brave. Okay, we're good. Homologous chromosomes are pairs of chromosomes that are similar in features such as length and centromere. The centromere is the anchor of the chromosome. Down here, look at the diagram. It's that circular bit right there. That's the centromere. It anchors where the DNA condenses to, but they don't have to be identical to each other. They got to be similar, but they don't have to be identical. Homologous chromosomes carry genes for the same traits, such as hair type, and at the same location. However, they can carry different forms of the same gene. Different forms of the same gene are called alleles. This is language that I'm going to test you on. You need to know what alleles are. These different forms account for differences in specific traits. A very oversimplified example is curly hair versus straight hair. So, for example, this is a homologous chromosome pair. This one came from mom, this one came from father. They code for the same thing. So, for example, these bands here, these guys together might code for eye color. Mom's chromosome has an idea of what it wants the eye color to look like. Dad's chromosome is going to provide perhaps a different set of information. And how these genes decide which traits take over is going to be the bulk of what we look at in this chapter. So these things code for the same quote-unquote idea or trait, but may, oh shoot, I want my page back, may have different thoughts, quote-unquote thoughts about each idea. And we're going to look at a very simplified view of how those decisions are made in the genetic code, which one gets coded for and when. This is where we're going to end, which is great because we got 2 minutes to the bell. When the bell goes, you may also go. Welcome to the wild, wacky, and horrendously dangerous world of genetics. Sorry? I like teaching this unit way more than the biology unit in grade 9. This one, and Michael, I agree with you. This one I find way more interesting. It's also way more dangerous. It can result in things like slavery and the Holocaust. Oh, and guys, this unit, because you guys ask different questions than my D block does, if you want to see some of the discussions that the other block is having, feel free to, if you're bored one night, feel free to pop into the YouTube channel, the YouTube playlist for that other block. And you'll see the kinds of questions that they're asking. They have the opportunity to see the kinds of questions you guys are asking. You're asking different stuff, and it's all really good. I wish some of those students were in both classes and some of you guys were in both classes too. Well, an example from yesterday was the siblings one. They asked about what happens when twins marry twins. You guys didn't. The conversation about in vitro fertilization. happened as a question in the other one, and I brought it up here because it was a good discussion to have in that one. So there, and I will try and do some of that, bringing those conversations across both classes, but I forget sometimes. So feel free to take a look at their videos if you're bored on one night. Wait, is it this block that we would be in? Yeah. As long as you've got nothing to do for me, you did that test. That's fine. Yeah, you're good. Okay. See you guys tomorrow. Michael and Himparis, take it outside. Sorry, Memphis and Himparis. Michael did nothing wrong. Okay. It's 74 marks. I don't know because I've broken it up in like there's 6 sections, and the numbering starts at 1 in each section. So there's like 15 or 16 multiple choice, and there's a whole page on Lewis and board diagrams, and then there's like 6 questions where you have to give me formulas, 6 questions where you have to give me the names, 4 questions where you have to balance, 6 where you have to do the reaction type stuff. So it's broken up that way. Most questions are worth, that section's worth 3, so that's 18 marks there. So 74 minus 18 is 52.
I'll get you a pencil.
Minus 2 minus 4 is 45 questions. But, I mean, some of them are drawing diagrams, some of them are balancing, whatever. Harleen, did you have a question? Okay. If you know what you're doing, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to get it done on the block. But if you need a little bit more time, I think we have tutorial after, so I need to start it as soon as I'm done the lesson tomorrow. Because there's going to be time for some more questions.
Matthew Vidal to the office, please. Matthew Vidal to the office.